Yeah, you know, the freaking nothing works at all. I was doing some videos for my other channel for navigating patterns yesterday, and like I fire up Kdenlive, I throw something in it to do a quick SRT file, and the SRT functionality is completely broken. Nothing's changed. No Windows updates. Nothing at all has changed since the last time I did this. And I'm like, well, that's a little weird. Like, I don't. Why would this happen? Like Kdenlive installs its own little Python environment somehow. I mean, I didn't really look into it that closely because why should I have to? And installs Whisper and gets it all working and whatever. It's all automatic. It's a script, big deal. I've written 1,000 of these, probably tens of thousands of these stupid little install scripts for automatic installs. This isn't a big deal. It doesn't work. I don't know what's broken about it. I do some work or try to fix it. Finally, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll install new Kdenlive. There's a slightly, it's a minor version update. We'll do that. Why not? Like, won't shut down. The process won't stop. I did every single internet how to stop a Windows 11 process thing. Didn't work. Finally said, well, I'm gonna finish up my work because I got all my layouts going, I'm gonna shut my machine down and I'll deal with it in the morning. Morning comes, didn't fix the problem. Said, what is Python script? Maybe I'll just modify it. So I modified the Python script, fixed the error. 100 more errors come up. And I'm like, what changed in this environment and why? And what did that what's going on? Figured out how to force a reinstallation of Whisper from within Kdenlive. The disadvantage of automation, there's no install uninstall button because it's not installed, but it's installed. Whatever. I fixed it. Then at some point, and I don't know if this happened when I rebooted or after, it had to be after though. It had to be. My network drive K went away. It's gone. It's gone. It's open in one commander, just fine. It works there. It doesn't work in any application in Windows at all. Like the file open buttons, it's not there. If I click on it from one commander, so I'm using one commander, I'm in the K drive, I click on a file, it goes to open on the machine and can't. And I'm like, well, how do you make that happen on a computer? It must have taken you millions of working man hours to break a file system in that particular way, where one application can see the file handle and the other applications can't see that file handle, like or the equivalent of it, the abstraction of it. How did you do that? That's amazing. This is a miracle. It's broken, bad, and evil, but like amazing. What? Windows does it again. How did you make that work? That's remarkable. Don't know. No idea. I had no idea. Because everything's broken. And I think part of the problem is that people who were sort of born into the affluent technological age don't understand what long lasting means. They think 3 years is a long time because that's a tech cycle. It's about 3 years. You get a laptop that's 3 years old? Oh, yeah, you need a new one. I mean, I've never bought a new laptop after 3 years. I think I'd rather kill myself. But, people do these things. Cars, too. Same thing. Like, oh, dude, got a 3-year-old car. It's time to get a new car. Like, what? And that's the thing. I think that a lot of the long-term infrastructure pieces are getting knocked out. And so we're really headed for some massive complexity collapse. And complexity collapse mainly occurs when you have these pieces that are taken out. You don't need them right away, or it looks like you don't need them, but they're there as stopgaps. And then when other pieces get taken out, the whole thing falls very quickly. And I gotta say, I mean, these past 5 years, I'm like, it sure looks like we're headed for some major complexity collapse of systems. And all the computer systems are tied together by certain things. right? And we saw this with buffer bloat. If you don't know about buffer bloat, you got to look it up. First of all, Getty's like description, his original blog entries, those are amazing. You get to see somebody who's actually smart, not any of the people you know now, because they're not actually smart. Troubleshoot in real time. And then it's not that he didn't fix it. It's that he had the contacts from Van Jacobson. For example, one of the original authors of TCP/IP. And he could just reach out to him, and Van Jacobson is just so ridiculously intelligent that he dove into the code and fixed it like right away. Meanwhile, you have every engineer in networking at Google and Cisco and all these other companies completely unable to even find the problem, much less fix it. There's not to say there aren't very talented network engineers at Google. Google's definitely fixing things with DNS and probably Cloudflare too, and a couple of other companies, I'm sure, right? But like, they could not find this error. They could not. They couldn't find it. They couldn't troubleshoot it, and they couldn't fix it. They didn't know how. They didn't understand the protocol at that level that well. I'm not saying they couldn't have gotten there. Maybe Van Jacobson was already there. He just needs to go into source code and like fix it and issue patch and be done. And he hadn't touched code in probably 25, 30 years, something stupid, right? Like, but we're not talking about the same thing. But those guys only come along once in a while. And there's only ever a few of them on the planet at once. And you can't skill up to be them. That's not how that works. And so as we lose these guys, these so-called graybeards, or however you want to refer to them, you're losing stuff. You're really losing stuff. And when there's no one there to replace them, and there often isn't, whole technology stacks collapse. And if you haven't been paying attention, Jonathan Blow did I think he called it The Collapse of Civilization. He's done a couple of those talks. It's great, right? I mean, he's sort of on it. I mean, I've been watching it for a lot longer than he has, and it's a lot worse than he thinks, but whatever. But unless you've been around long, you didn't realize how much technology we've lost in the tech space, in computers alone. How many wheels have been reinvented, how many things people just don't know. My Rust Linux thing that blew up, like I think we're at near 3,000 views or something on that freaking ridiculous video. Like you don't understand. Like you just don't get it. And you're not making technical arguments, and you don't notice. And a lot of that is because all the same problems that are, say, the meaning crisis, right, or as I like to call it, the intimacy crisis, because that's really what it is, are just becoming evident everywhere. We've got this apparent dust up between Linus Tech Tips and Gamers Nexus. What do you think that is? These are just human problems creeping into something that you didn't think had any human problems, because it looked flawless from the outside. It's everything. What do you think broken Windows 11 is, where Explorer just suddenly starts crashing one day, left, right, and center, for no apparent reason, with no changes? And then other things start breaking, and you don't know why. And I mean, I can simulate most of this stuff down to the bit level, and I can't figure out how the hell Kdenlive's Whisper integration broke. I'm like, I don't know where to look for that bug. Now, until yesterday, until that happened, you could call me on the phone and say, hey, I've got this piece of software that's doing this, and I could tell you within 3 guesses where the bug was without seeing source code, because I know how this stuff works. Not anymore, I don't. Those days are gone. We've got containers everywhere, and everybody could configure their container in any number of bad ways, right? And there's way more broken ways than right ways. And all the broken ways can work, right? At least for a while, or under certain circumstances, or whatever, right? But eventually, that catches up to you, right? And I think that's what happened there. I don't know if that's a container setup. I don't know what it's actually doing there. I can think of 5 different ways you could do that. I don't know which way they used. I wasn't going to investigate it. I didn't want to debug it. I wasn't going to submit a change request or any of that nonsense. I never do that stuff anymore. And there's reasons why. Like I did back in the day. That should tell you something. And I stopped I wonder why, right? And so it's like, yeah, I don't want to be involved in that stuff. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. Yeah, eventually everybody got corporate jobs. Good for them. A corporate sponsorship or whatever. Good for them. I wasn't interested. I'm still not interested. It's not what I want to do. I'm trying to get the hell out of tech, to be honest, because it's a mess. Like the market's a mess. The whole thing's a mess. And like, unless you've seen these collapses, you just don't understand. So I remember, I think it was, yeah, it must have been 2001, March 2001, the end of the world. Tech industry per se did collapse, but what did was all the ways you get jobs in tech. So what I had been doing, because I was an early adopter of certain things, like, consulting, right? So I'm consulting. I'm in pretty good with all the temp employment firms, which is a rising industry at the time. And it was, there were like three sections basically, right? There were temp factory workers, there were temp sort of, what do you want to call them? Fill-in workers, like admins, typists, uh, whatever. And then there was the tech sector, which is huge. And the temporary employment agencies in Massachusetts at the time were the fastest growing companies in Massachusetts for like years. Like not the same one, but like different ones, right? Because they had a 45% margin. So you're making $100 an hour, they're making $145 an hour, right? That's how that works. They're getting 45, right? So yeah, and you're getting the rest. So, yeah, there's this huge, 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 huge industry. And year 2000, did a lot of work there, right? Made bank, big bank, did great job, right? Fantastic. And then everything's fine for like a year, right? March 2001. My corporate job kind of blows up. Long political story, Fortune 500. It's a mess. Nothing I mean, I'm doing a great work, but they wanted me to fail. And that was never going to happen because I don't do that. Some people fail. It's not my thing. So I was doing things that they thought couldn't be done. So they thought, well, we're going to ask him to do this. And of course, you can't do that. So he'll fail. And of course, I could do all of it. And it wasn't good. And it took me way too long because I was very technical to figure out the politics situation. So I got caught in the crossfire and like bang. And I was like, oh, but I wouldn't have done what they wanted anyway. It would have been like, no, why? This is dumb. I'm here to fix technical problems, not to solve your long-term 5-year plan on screwing over the IT department. That wasn't what I was there for. And I would never do that. Anyway, I don't believe in that. I believe in cooperating and getting work done. That's what I believe in. And most people don't. Most people believe in getting work done by themselves on their own. It's a big change. So I leave that place. I'm like, I can make double my money if I don't have a career here. That's fine. That was 2 careers in a row at Fortune 500 companies that weren't going anywhere for different reasons, very different reasons. But still, I was like, this is a bad deal. I'm going back into the consulting arena. I already know everybody. Everybody there knows me. I have a rep among the consulting firms. There were temporary agencies. I wasn't doing consulting per se, right? So I start making some calls. I've got 4 interviews lined up in under a week. It's Boston tech market at that time. Hot as it was, so hot it burned, I almost every week, 10 jobs a week turned down. 10. Because I was on a job. I'm like, no, I never leave jobs. Never. Right. I've got codes. I follow my code. Like that's part of the code. You don't leave a contract for another contract. You just don't. There are extenuating circumstances. I get that, but I never ran into them. So what happened was I made it to 0 of those interviews. 2 of those interviews were with companies that were bankrupt 6 months later. Bankrupt. Gone. Big companies, big advertising campaigns. Everybody knew who they were, right? Billboards, right? All over the country. ads, Super Bowl ad, and one of them had a Super Bowl ad. It was gone. It just had the Super Bowl ad. Gone. Bankrupt. Over. Things change fast. That wasn't the big deal. The big deal was every temporary agency I knew of, so maybe not everyone in Massachusetts or anything, but everyone I knew of either closed up entirely, just gone, boom, closed the doors, right? Within a month, or closed an office, in the Boston area. Now, to be fair, a lot of them had like 4 Boston area offices. Boston's not a big place. If you got 4 offices, they're within half an hour of each other, buddy. Like, this is not, right? It's not a big city. It's kind of constrained by the Emerald Necklace. It's one of the nice things about Boston. It's a constrained city. It can't get too big, actually. Gone. Like, just the whole industry collapsed. And then I was out of work for a long time. I had padding, whatever. I was used to consulting. I had plenty of cash lined up, but gone. Yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And then I went to work for my friend for a while, and yeah, no, it was a mess. And the whole industry took a hit, right? But the job end of the tech industry went quicker than the tech companies did, right? Because a lot of the world is based on projection and not on actual numbers. So this gets into things like momentum and things like prediction and how people calculate risk in the market. And so what had happened was the market collapsed very suddenly for consulting firms, or temporary agencies rather. And then the rest of the industry followed, because that's how that works. Right? 2 different time frames, right? And then it took a very long time to recover, right? So things collapse quickly and they recover slowly. And that's why you have to be careful with things and be a little forgiving of minor errors. Because if you point out errors and collapse something, that's very easy to do, but it's not easy to build it back up. Not at all. It's an asymmetrical relationship, right? And people now tend to think everything's symmetrical and the transitive property applies. And no, especially not for building things, especially not when things are built by lots of companies or lots of different people, pioneers. Markets may have a single pioneer, right? Or industries or whatever, but there's a lot of talented people following that pioneer. And, maybe they're parasitic, maybe they steal work, whatever. Usually the pioneer doesn't actually care because they're so far up front that whatever. That's kind of a gift to everybody else. That's the way I like to think about it. But if you do away with that, everything falls apart. And it's sort of what happened in the mainstream media. And it could happen here in the so-called YouTube tech journalism. I don't think that's a real thing. I'm sorry, but I do, not that these guys aren't doing good work. I actually like Gamers Nexus. I almost never watched them, but when I watch them, like, he does good work. Like, he's a great guy, whatever. I've never liked Linus Tech Tips. He always looked like a shifty little snake to me. I don't know anything about his business practices, or was this guy Lewis? I forget Lewis's last name. I don't know what, but this is the way industries are. People are not perfect. There's usually 1 or 2 sort of borderline guys, right? There's a bunch of guys, trying to do their best who, and they're not great. I like Gamers Nexus. I think they do excellent work. I wouldn't put it at the high quality that I prefer. Some of it is. Their Intel tour, that was great. It was freaking awesome. I mean, it looked a little clownish, to be honest, but I got so much out of it. The guy's doing his best, and he does good work. Do I think he's a top 10 percenter? I don't at all. I don't think their testing is all that rigorous. It may be the most rigorous out there, and that's good. Like I'm not, trying to shit on the guy. Also, a little unprofessional still, right? And that's okay because, to some extent, the mainstream media collapsed, right? We don't have CNET the way we used to on TV and some of the other efforts in that area, right? We don't have things like Computer Chronicles and stuff anymore. Back in the day, when I was growing up, we don't have that stuff. And that sort of tech journalism thing never took off. I mean, like the Amiga magazines and the old C64 magazines and all that. And hey, that's how I learned how to program. That stuff was fantastic. Those people were really dedicated. Also, there was a lot less relative money on the line. Now, that's not a money corrupts thing, because money doesn't corrupt. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But money may emphasize your corruption or enhance it or increase it, because it's a lever. It enhances and increases everything. But like, they weren't doing it for the money. And most of the people that are doing work like that had money, or they were being, we'll say, charitably funded by other efforts. Oh, I'll work for you, and I'll work for you for this much money, but you have to fund my hobby. That used to go on a lot in the media industry before it got collapsed by certain bad actors in certain decades. That's actually important to understand, because all you're seeing now is just more of the same. I'm going to continue to see this sort of breakdown of whether it's technology or the tech journalism industry. It sounds so weird to say. I have a hard time. Or whatever. Like, this is going to increase because it wasn't stable. Too much money too fast is an indication that it's not a stable thing. Like, when your thing is moving too fast. And we're very much in the affluent tech world where we want our thing now. We don't want to wait. 3 years is a ridiculous time frame, even though whole media empires took 15 years to build back in the day. And that wasn't a million years ago, right? Right. And you haven't seen it recently because everything kind of skyrockets up and then blows up, right? Huffington Post. Where's that? Right. And so the apparent destruction of these maybe mid-tier, but usually high-tier sorts of mainstream media outlets is not a good thing, and it's not a good sign. And the fact that tech is filling that void is not good, because there are people filling that void that don't know that's what they're doing. They don't even realize what's happening. They don't know what they've been sucked into. They're not having the realization over the thing they're involved in. And tech does that to you because it moves so fast and it's so complicated. Like, I don't know what the bug is with Windows 11 Explorer or why it just showed up one day randomly, not near an update. I don't know how you could possibly make that happen on a computer. And I don't think people are understanding. Computers were meant to give reliable, consistent output on a given input. And something like AI is designed to not do that. So it breaks the paradigm and purpose of a computer. It just does. We can argue whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. That's not this video. I think I have an earlier AI video. You can go check that out. I don't care, actually. It doesn't matter. It's just not important in the world. Regardless of what you think of AI, it's not important in the world. It's a great tool. I use it all the time. I use about 3 AIs all the time. But they're not important, right? They don't do really important work. They save me a lot of time, but that's actually not that important. It's helpful, but that's different. So when you look at these things, you start to realize, We're not even using computers for what computers were designed to be good at and what they, by design, are good at. That's part of the complexity collapse. Like, this is not good. Like, now we don't want reliable, consistent results for the same input out of a computer. Why not? What does that say for things like automation? How high does this Tower of Babel go? And how long does it last?